All right, Nicola, we're back. It's been a few years since you and I sat down like this. For the people that are watching us for the first time, Nicola and I are co-founders of a company. We run a software development agency of about 100 people. We also, on top of that, build some of our own products. So we have this model where we take some of the profits that we make off of the consultancy and invest into our own products. And a lot has changed in the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years. So we've been doing this since 2016. Came into a market that was like really growing, a really good time to enter. I would say it was a thankful time for you and I to get into this because it was a good time to get into it. And it gave us a little bit of room for all the mistakes that we made along that path. But then the market took a tougher turn in the past 2 or 3 years. And you and I, for people to understand, we're located in 2 different spots. I'm located in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where we do most of our development, and our market is primarily Scandinavia, the US, and a little bit towards the German market. So, with that in mind, being that you're closer to the market, what's your experience been the past few years of what's been happening in the IT sector?
Yeah, so that everyone knows that, I'm based in Gothenburg, Sweden. And like you said, a lot has happened. And you forgot one thing, that we are also childhood friends for 25 years.
Absolutely. For the people that don't have that context, we've known each other since we were way kids, way back.
Yeah. But like you said, a lot has changed. I think the market started to dip in 2022 when I think capital became much more expensive and not as easy to get. So that crazy growth that we had for the first 6-7 years, that completely just dried out. So I think a lot of IT companies have started to do sales. We started to build a sales team in 2022, late 2022, and before that we didn't have any sales team at all. We got all the clients from marketing, and so capital got way more expensive, and also everything with AI came, so that impacted a lot as well. So it's been a way tougher market, I think, definitely. So
I agree. It was a combination of 2 things. So I think we almost had a peak in 2022 as far as interest rates were still very low, and then in towards 2023 that big dip came. But if we think in terms of companies that are consulting companies, it seems to me, I don't know if this is your experience, that it's kind of just a cascading effect of, we saw the first layoffs happening in the United States. Eventually they came to Sweden, which is our biggest market. We saw a lot of big companies laying off a lot of people, like, Spotify, H&M, everybody was cutting down. And then it was a combination of a crash in the economy, but also then on top of that, AI. So I think a lot of companies were looking at, well, in this next turn, let's try to not hire as many people, but rather let's see what we can do with AI to be more effective and do more with less people. I think everybody is thinking in that direction. And then it seems cascadingly, because there was a lot of people on the market that were available for work now, that affected the demand for our kinds of services, which were abroad, right?
Yeah. And I think as far as that, I think it's been good for software engineers in general. I think it was kind of a crazy job market. It was so easy to get a job that it was also creating a little bit of a bad attitude, I would say, a little bit of, if you just, the demand for your services is that big, it's so easy to get a job also that you miss on some basic skills as well as just being a working professional. I think you remember that.
Yeah.
Wasn't it that IT company in Serbia that did that funny video with the senior developer that was on a interview and just demands everything, but still just turns it down? So I think it has been good for the humans in the software engineering industry to be more, I would say, professionals, just be working professionals. But I also at the same time feel a bit sorry for younger people coming out of college right now, because it's super hard to get a job compared to how it was 2 years ago. I don't know, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It went from the youth, and this is of course very relevant for people that are young and coming into the industry. The people that have been around for 10, 15 years, that's a completely different thing. But I think for the people that just came into the industry maybe 3 years ago, there definitely was a sense of entitlement. The demand is so high, I should immediately, get this and this and this. And now it's shifted almost too much in the other direction, that where demand, especially for junior developers, has fallen off a cliff. And it's nobody's fault. It's just the state of the economy. It's not as high of a demand. And when the demand is falling off, naturally people are going to try to pick the best developers that are available on the market. And what's happened now, especially in this region, well, not especially, I think in a lot of regions,
Same in Sweden.
yeah, same in Sweden. So like all these kids that saw these huge opportunities in IT, and everybody was telling them, including us, go into IT. There's so many opportunities. Now that generation is coming out of college, and not only are they having a tough time finding work, they're struggling to get an internship, to get any kind of experience. But hopefully, things will turn for the better again, and there will be new ways for them to come into the market. And maybe, there's also going to be an element of a new kind of entrepreneurship that happens right now. So if we look at an old recession in 2007, 2008 in the United States, that gave, birth to many new startups that came out because a lot of people that were very talented maybe lost their jobs and they started working on internal ideas. But time will tell eventually what happens there.
Yeah, and I would say that the specific positions we are talking about, there was like educations that were maybe 2-year front-end developer position. That's very thin role. And those roles specifically I think we are seeing less and less of that because of AI, that they can create the whole front end for you eventually, right? Yeah. So you have to, as engineers, we have to be much more broader these days, that you have to be able to cover more things overall. So it's...
And how do you think that affects developers? I think when you and I grew up, that was kind of the standard, right? So you had to learn a little bit how to set up the server. You had to learn a little bit of back end and front end, especially because it was, when we were young, server side rendered. So it was all in the same thing. You were just a programmer. And then eventually, as demand grew, we got these separated roles and people became specialists. Now it's kind of going back a little bit in the other direction again. Yeah, there are higher expectations, but again, it's also, I would say, like higher pressure on developers. What do you think is the perspective from the developer side right now? How are they feeling about what's happening on the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely feel threatened, like because the expectations were different before, right? And I mean, I think I even said myself, there would be no shortage of developer ever.
Yeah.
Because it felt like that 3-4 years ago, and a lot of things have changed. So I think it's tough. At the same time, if you see AI as an opportunity, I think you can do way more things than before, right? So I think it's again comes back to attitude, like don't see these things as a threat, but more as an opportunity to become even better developer. I mean, I myself haven't coded for a few years, but it's easy to get into it. I think you feel the same. That it's everything feels easier to work with these tools, but we have those conservatives, I would say, developers that don't refuse to use these new technologies, which I think is a mistake, in my opinion. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think it's a weird time to get into software development. Maybe it's just because we're a little bit older. I guess the closest that I could compare it to what's happening right now is the way that we grew up with Google, and we could Google things quickly, while the generation before us had to learn most of their things out of books and apply them. And when you got stuck, you had to find the next book and so on. So that level of speed, as far as how quickly you can get access to information. But at the same time, to be honest, even when we were young, when we were, Googling things, working with Stack Overflow, let's be frank about it. A lot of times you would copy things out of Stack Overflow, not understand entirely what was happening, paste it in, and you were watering down the quality and the understanding of the developers in a sense. And now I think there's another abstraction layer with ChatGPT because it's so specific. You can ask it for this specific case. The only difference is that you can't know with 100% certainty that it makes sense what it's written, because 1 in 100 times or 1 in 90 times it might hallucinate entirely, and you as a developer have to be able to identify that. Ultimately, what I feel is that it's very brutal. Like it doesn't matter how we feel about it. I think that technology is always going to move forward, and I think people might feel frustrated with the speed. You and I talked about it this morning. Like every morning you have to sit and read up on what's happening to stay on top of things, right? Because the competition will stay on top of things. So it requires us to learn a ton, and I think that there's no option there. I think we just have to. And of course, if people want to be reluctant and say, well, I don't want to, I think this is not going to work out. The other day I was in the gym with a guy that's actually a friend, but he's extremely on the conservative side. He's like, oh, everything this AI thing will like implode. None of it will work. Like, there's 500 million users here. I'm not sure there's some traction going on. So I don't see that happening. But if we're the spectra, we're probably not even the most optimistic. There are people that are way more optimistic as far as the capabilities of AI than us. And on the other end, people that think that it's all going to implode. But I think you have to be at least on the optimistic side to have a better chance for the future. That's my take on it. And if you let time, like, there's a chance that if you don't want to adapt with it, I think that time can run you over because you simply won't be as effective as the people that are using AI to work with them on an everyday basis.
Yeah. For me personally, I think it's really hard to relate to those conservative people because when you use these things, everything goes so much easier. Like even you write a contract or whatever, to do that by yourself, like it doesn't make any sense. I have done maybe 1,000 contracts, but just to read through it now instead of writing everything manually, right. I mean, it changes everything. But for me, it's hard to relate. Like to say, I mean, I think I'm strategic lazy in that sense, right? That if I can find a quicker way to do it, I will use that naturally, right? So it's...
Well, I think this person was specifically, and he had read some books about it, so it's not that he wasn't read up on, he understood what it was about. And he talked about the fact that we'll never get to the point that large language models don't, to some extent, hallucinate.
Yeah.
And if it's mission critical, for example, it's a driving car, it's autopilot this, autopilot that, anything that's mission critical, you have to at least believe that it's 100%. So you can always have the human error making it collapse. But with AI, his point was that it can't do anything that's mission critical, which is a lot of the things in the end. But then, we work with these things where you have AIs that double check AIs, but the problem is cascading, right? So if this AI does a mistake, you have a second AI that needs to validate that it hasn't made a mistake, but this AI is also 1% off. I think time will tell, but I'm on the optimistic side. I think with these solutions, with agents that, double check each other, I think it is already good enough that people are ready to use it in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
But again, we've seen the examples in software development where, people build something, throw it out, and immediately it's hacked because they don't know what they threw out online.
Yeah.
You might have personal information. So the damage can be tremendous if you just use AI like that and don't double check the work that's being done.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's just that's the nature of the beast there. So let me go off to a different topic where you see things going. One of the things that we are is a software development agency, and we're not a classical one. I guess we are very classical. We do very classical things, but we are also, to be frank, like oftentimes for the markets that we work with, we are their nearshoring solution. So, for example, Sweden, our primary market, they can work with Swedish companies, but they work with us for many different reasons. It's a combination of access to new talent pools. Price, of course, plays a role. We have a great ratio between the quality, the competence of the people, and the quality of the work that they can do. How do you see our world changing? So not just the consultancy in general, but like nearshoring. What are the effects that you're seeing, for example, in the Swedish market in context to nearshoring?
I think we see a lot of more companies using nearshoring and outsourcing because of the general state of the economy in Scandinavia and Sweden. That you saw Stena IT from Gothenburg. They moved their whole IT development to Poland. And I think more and more are looking into that direction because they need to cut costs.
Yeah.
The companies are struggling. Before, I think it was like, I'd say, just a luxury to have people on site speaking Swedish. And I think a lot of companies don't have that luxury anymore. And there are other options like nearshoring then with lower cost. I would say also a little bit, we have been working in Sweden and Bosnia for 8-9 years now. And I see also different in attitude. I think in Sweden, we have a lot of vacation days. We have, I would say, we have had it really good for a long time. And I think the people here after the war have had it a little bit rougher, and they just they don't have 4 or 5 weeks of vacation straight. I think just a habit of working more right now. So I think the companies are using that in Sweden and Scandinavia, that we can nurture and take, I would say, use of these services, and people that are ambitious and also have the to help grow these Swedish companies. So I think that is one benefit. Also, I would say there is still a lack of talent to these big companies in Sweden to be able to fulfill the requirements and the demand for the services. But I would say still that we. Sorry, I got a little bit off guard there.
No worries. We were talking about the alternative for outsourcing versus doing it in Sweden, and I think a lot of our people have a strong work ethic here in Bosnia and Herzegovina, just like you said. So I would agree with that. One of the things that I've been thinking about for a long time, because we've been here at it for 8 years now, and a lot of things have changed over the last 8 years, is like where is the sweet spot of outsourcing in terms of, again, price versus quality. I spoke to a friend the other day. He has a Norwegian company, and they used to do outsourcing with Poland. And it's just not an option for them anymore, because the quality of life and the economy of Poland has been growing so rapidly, and the cost of developers has gone up to a level where it's barely profitable for them to work. So they're not considering Poland as a nearshoring alternative anymore. So Poland has kind of developed themselves out of that position in that country. Over the last 8 years here in the Balkan regions, the state of this economy in IT has been great for the people that are working in it. Like if you just look at the percentages, the amount of like salary increase that's happened over the last 7 or 8 years is tremendous as well, which is great. And then you have to compare that to maybe countries that are earlier than us in that development. Maybe there are some places in Asia, in South America and so on, where they haven't gotten to that point. But at the same time, they're very much lower in cost than the Eastern European and Balkan countries right now. What is your take there? Like, what are Swedish companies looking for, or rather, what is anybody looking for when choosing a partner, and they compare these different alternatives?
I think a lot of companies are tempted by the low cost in Asia and so on, but also have probably every client meeting that I have is as a bad story over there. Also, there's great companies in India, in Bosnia, and Sweden, but it's also bad ones, and I think a lot of people have had a bad experience. I think it's a big culture shock to work with Asia. It's much more further away as far as Europe in culture. To understand and learn how to work. I think we are much closer here in Europe as far as culture wise, but also you have the time difference that makes it a little bit more complex. You have 6-7 hours. You have to plan your meetings. So I think it's wrong also to say to have outsourcing as a big term. That's why we are also introducing like nearshoring as a term, because it's closer, not only in distance, but in culture as well. And I think what we have learned over the years is also to see each other often. That we, with the serious clients that we have, we fly up a team between 1 to 3 times per year just to see each other, work for a few days in a workshop. Then working remotely works great, but if you haven't seen each other for ever, and then basically the project is stressful, then you start wondering, okay, what are they doing down there? What are they doing up there? I've seen it so many times, and it's just a trust thing that if you've been seeing each other face to face, like just once, that makes a lot of a big difference, I would say, for that. But I think still it will be those combinations of, because language is important, like communication. Some companies in Sweden will not have English speaking because they want to speak Swedish. I would say the clients that I'm talking about are usually public sector. They have a lot of older people that are not that comfortable with working in English and so on. So that they will always be a first option to use Swedish developers, but especially the startups. But also, I think that's the change we've seen in the last 3 years, that the enterprise companies are actually thinking about it more and more, because before they had the budgets to only work with Swedish ones. They had that luxury, but now there is a lot of companies starting to do that outsourcing, not only to Asia, but nearshoring as well, because they have to.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
no budgets.
it's just a matter of being smart in your work. And I think, quite honestly, that a lot of these, uh, a lot of the experience that you get from Asia is as much a fault of the people making the orders as the people like delivering. So,
Yeah.
of course, there's all the elements that you talked about. There's the time zone, the cultural differences, so on, and those are all very, very legit. But at the same time, what people that are making the orders have to understand is that IT is a very globalized market right now. So anybody can work from anywhere for any other market. Maybe it's a bit tougher if it's like embedded systems, so you have to be on site and stuff like that. But most, which is like web, mobile development, all of these classical software engineering positions, anybody from any position in the world can work for any company anywhere. So if you're ordering work for, $15, $20 an hour, you have to ask yourself, like, what kind of developers am I getting? I'm obviously getting the people that don't have an opportunity to work for a higher rate, right? And of course, there is a point of like diminishing returns. So why are we able to work at a lower cost? Well, because of lower cost of living in our respective countries. But at the same time, it's a balance of those two things, right? So I think as a person that's ordering work, you have to understand that like good developers are going to cost anywhere. Like if you want to have them now, you can cut costs to a certain extent, but not entirely, right? So I think that's my whole point there. And then maybe people go for the cheapest alternative, and then they'll talk about an entire country. Oh yeah, this country can't deliver well. Well, maybe it's the price you were willing to pay for the kinds of services that you were trying to buy.
Yeah, like you said, it's really about finding that sweet spot. That it's a dangerous route to go in, also to just only go for the lowest cost, right? Like where if then you really have to have someone internally that can evaluate the quality, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have that, that's a really dangerous route, because you might just look at, okay, this is 50% lower cost over a year, but if they build a system that is really, really bad at its core, you might have to scrap the whole thing, right? So it's a dangerous route to go into, I would say.
I think so as well. And this is very cliche, what I'm about to say, but you and I have been so long in this, work with so many different developers. But the difference in quality of developers is like literally, if you have a good person and a not so good person, it's probably 5, 6, 7x, probably in the like quality of code, speed and delivery and so on. And maybe the price difference is in 1.5 or like twice the difference, right? So by getting these high end developers, if you will, you're actually getting a multiplier of output. Now, of course, that's tough when you're making a quota. So if you're a company on the other side trying to buy services, you don't know who's on the other end, right? So you're trying to figure out who you can trust, who can actually deliver on a high level. What's your experience there, being so close to these customers? What are some of the things that you do to be able to convince them of the quality that, for example, our company can deliver? What are they looking for? And what do you try to communicate to them so they can feel safe in working with us?
Yeah, I think, obviously we have a long track record, right? So we have worked with big enterprise companies like IKEA, Volvo, but also startups. So I think that is usually changing the tone of the meeting. I think it's tough to start selling services to enterprise companies in Sweden without that. We have worked really hard for our brand to be able to get this trust and to deliver year after year, right? So I really feel in the meetings that when I showed the previous customer cases with Swedish companies, that the tone of the meeting changes, right? So it's a lot about that people want to see that, okay, my neighbor worked with this person. It's very basic, like human, I would say, nature to say, okay, I know these guys, they work with you, then I feel safe. I would say it's because a lot of the times people are not technical enough to evaluate and so on. So it is a trust thing. Like if you're hiring a carpenter or whatever in a different industry, right? It's a trust
References,
thing. Yeah,
really,
exactly. So I think that is the most important I see from, I would say, non-technical buyers. But also I see that sometimes, like you said, this output of a great developer, 5, 6 times the output of I would say an average one. I think a lot of people don't understand that value either, that how big it is, because they can, again, not evaluate the whole thing. But I think it was also interesting that you mentioned that it is a big difference, and I think I want to be clear there also that it's not about nationality there. That these people are in Sweden, they are in Bosnia, they are in India, these really rock stars, and I think that is tricky when you are, for example, in Sweden and you're paying higher salaries for maybe a mediocre developer, right? So it's you have to really balance that cost that you're paying. Is it really worth? Do I have a really rock star here or not? Then there is a world market there open for you if you just are open for it.
I think it's just like so tough to know. It's like if you and I go to a car mechanic right now, we have no idea if it's good or not. So then I think it's what you talked about, references, who says that, they've done a good job with them and so on. I want to touch a little bit on one of the things that in the past 2 years that we've done is we've started shifting our consulting services more towards the enterprise side of things than working with startups. I think early on, we did a lot of work with startups, a ton of MVPs and so on. And to some extent, we still do that, but it's not as heavy. What's your experience in the past few years when trying to work with startups, or in general, your take on working with startups?
I mean, I think both you and me really love startups. It's so fun. It's so exciting. It's usually a new idea, an adventure to go on, but it's also a lot of headaches, right? It's really stressful. It's always, budgets are never there. It's always a fight for survival. So I think you really get the headaches of a startup, but as a consultancy, if you work with them, you don't get the upside, right? It's a really big risk, and then you don't get the upside when it goes well. Then a lot of people hire internally, and it makes sense. Like a lot of our clients were open from the day one that we will use you guys as consultants until we can hire our own team internally later on. So I think we still are really good at building MVPs, but I think our expectations is more on that MVP, and then we will see if we will grow with them. I think most realistically not, but we're just seeing that initial scope, and then they do something internally. I think we see it as a short deal, but then we have some cases that we actually have a team because they really don't want to handle anything about the tech side of things, that they really want to focus on sales and marketing. But the reason why we switched to enterprises and the focus there is because it's much more stable companies. Like if you work with companies that's been around for 50, 60 years, if we talk about Sweden and the Swedish industrial companies, then you have a 3-year plan. You have a 2-year plan. There's a budget set aside for it. There's not going to be like next few months, something changes, our biggest client disappeared, like that, where you can see that in startup, that then you just give a notice period of 30 days and your team is gone.
All right.
You don't have that at all. So it's a different tempo. It's still really cool projects to work on, but on the downside with the bigger companies, enterprise, it is slow also. If you want to build see your product shine in the real light, maybe it is 1.5 years to see the light of that project, or 2, because all the stakeholders really want to have their take on how it's built. So, but I think for Zendev, I think it's been much more stable to have these kind of clients, but we still do the MVPs, and we are instead focusing on startups and our own equity startups that we own ourselves. So if we perform well, we get the upside as well.
The upside of it as well. I think I agree with everything you said there. And I think a lot of developers also initially think that what they think is that it is so much more fun. And in a sense, it is, because it's new, it's up and coming, like it's a gamble. We're soon going to get for the first time some sort of response from the market on if what we're building in is exciting or not. But I've also seen the other side of it, which is that because you keep up that tempo with that startup, there's a chance that you burn out in that specific project, right? And they don't think about that. It's just like, it's more exciting. It's not just more exciting. It's also a chance to burn out, right? Because tough deadlines. I mean, usually if they are a startup, it means they have a finite amount of money that they perhaps raised from some series. Maybe they had a seed round from an angel investor or something like that. And then you have to make sure to get them to that next level. And like you said, it's not going to be sure that you actually follow them along the path. Maybe eventually they hire their own internal team, which is natural as well. But
yeah, I want to say there also that you really have to be in have good circumstances in life to be in a startup.
yeah,
I think it's mostly for young people without kids, or maybe a little bit grown up kids. But if I have kids myself,
yeah,
3.5 and 8 months, and it's tough to be in a startup because that takes a lot of time as well. So I mean, you have to have the real good circumstances to be able to do those 12, 14 hours a day, which is some usually takes to make it successful, right? So I
yeah.
think that's something good, really important to look at if you're going into a startup. Do I have the circumstances? Is my life in order in general? Because it will take a lot. It will take up everything if you want to do it properly,
Oh,
right?
for sure, for
I think
sure.
we said it also, like for every successful startup, there's someone, there's a burnout there. Like I think
Yeah,
both you and me went through it. Like I don't know,
yeah,
it's a loose definition burnout, but
yeah.
it's yeah, you will get problems with stress.
Yes, yes. Let's put it like that. Yeah, there
Yeah,
will be some damage for sure.
yeah,
There will be some damage for sure. Yeah, I think one of the things now that's happening is because the state of the market is changing so much, and we touched a little bit about upon it earlier. um, AI right now. So it's one thing what we understand what AI is. It's one thing what the broad public understands about AI. I think from the perspective of the broad public, they're looking at the end services that they can use, and at the very top, starting with like services like ChatGPT, and now over time, I think some of the other ones are becoming more popular as well for like B2C consumers, like Google AI Studio and so on. And then most of us on the second layer of like software development companies, we are working towards their LLMs, hitting them with different APIs and so on. So we have an understanding of what's out there, a good understanding of what can be used. But what about on the side of people that are ordering, for example, that are in larger corporations? Well, you have conversations with them and the term AI comes up, and I'm sure it comes up a lot right now. Do they understand the capabilities, the expectations of what they can have? How do those conversations go?
I think it's quite widespread out how much people know there on, but usually not enough. I would say that they don't see the possibilities if you start implementing these things, and actually that everyone is using it while developing today. Like I often get the question, do you guys use AI? Like yes, every day everyone like are using it, right? But so it's still this, everyone is talking about it, but I don't think they have the depth to understand like how much you can do with it. It's and it is like that with bigger organization that they take a little bit longer to shift, but it's I think once the ball turns, then it's going to be fast as well, and it has to be, right. So
Right.
it's yeah, but from our side, I think it's much more fun to work when, because the value we can create is that much bigger, right?
Yeah.
Those things that maybe took a day to work now takes 2 hours, like,
Yeah.
so the value as a consultancy that you can create is much bigger, right? I don't
Yeah.
see us building a consulting company with 1,000 people, but with 100 people almost that we have, we can create so much more. So I think it's an exciting time to work, because I just the output that you do every day, it's much more everything. I don't know how you feel about it, like with that.
Oh, for sure. And the way that I see it is also what's tricky, I think, with a lot of these large companies is that there's these huge code bases, huge systems, because they were not what you would call today like an AI first company. So you didn't have AI when you started,
Yeah,
and you couldn't plan your entire project, your entire product with that in mind.
no,
So now you have to take a few steps back and figure out all of the things that I built over all of these years. Is this really still the best solution now that this is available?
yeah,
And oftentimes it's not. And then it's just a question of this new person on the market. He's starting with AI first in mind, and then having a completely different mindset when building their product, and maybe even an advantage in that way. But at the same time, that person still doesn't have the entire domain knowledge. They don't have all the clients and so on. So I think if you are a company that is sitting with a big system and organization, the best way to go about is, if you're not entirely sure the capabilities, is to sit down with someone like you that understands it, what the capabilities are, and then go through, okay, what do you have right now? What does the process look like right now? Where are the pain points? What do you think can be done faster? And
mm,
where I think AI right now in those large corporations can create the most value is quite honestly in mapping unstructured data, right? So before, in all of these earlier systems, you had to have different like integrations between different APIs, and it was very clear this had to be the input, and then this was the output, and then the other system, this was exactly what it had to take in.
Yeah.
Now with AI, because it works with the language, it's much easier. You can have inputs in 50 different ways, and the output is still going to be able to catch it, right? Or rather, the input is going to be able to catch these different outputs and still understand what you're trying to communicate. And I think that creates a ton of value for a ton of different systems, these like natural language mapping between systems.
Yeah.
That's one of my experiences. I mean, we're doing that right now for one of our products, and maybe by the time this podcast comes out, people will be able to see that feature. Like one of the examples of what we're doing is we have this tool Linkbound, and it is a tool that based off of who's engaging with your content on LinkedIn is going to tell you who you potentially could do work with, right? Because they're sending you social signals that they're interested in the work that you're doing. And then it becomes a more warm lead than reaching out to somebody that has no idea of who you are, right? But the extension of that is that, well, who are these people? What information do I have about them? What companies do they work in? Who are all the key stakeholders in them? What do I know about them? And with all of that information in mind and all of my information about it, I know what my own offer is. I can say, well, see if we're a match. But just like with pure text, right? I don't have to think about, what kind of input can I get from them? What kind of output can I get from them? And the output that I get is not just you are a match, but you are a match because of this. You worked on this case before and they work with this in their company. For that reason, the first time when you reach out to them, it will be good to mention this, blah, blah, blah. It's amazing, right? So this hasn't been available in sales tools earlier, but I think that's what's really cool. What we can do with like free text and just large language models.
Yeah. And interesting with that feature, would you be able then to input your previous projects in Linkbound to see if it's a match, or how do Linkbound know
So
if it is a
Linkbound
match?
is being restructured. So everything starts with an offer right now. So
Yeah.
we've gone in that direction. So it first asks you, are you a B2B offer or B2C offer? What kind of work have you done before? Enter all your case studies either through PDFs or links to websites where you have your case studies. And then it takes all of that and it sits with it and it makes that perfect matchmaking. So again, I consider it mostly kind of like a replacement, and this is always a sensitive word, but a replacement for pre-sales. So these were the people that had to do the research before and give it to a salesperson. Hey, here are my 5 reports on why this is a good potential like prospect for us. And now you go out and reach out to them. It's going to do all of that in the background for us right now. So
yeah, like you said, it's like replacement is a hard word, but like, it's a tool. Then you can do 10x. Like if you have one person for that, then they can just do 10 more. Right? But no, that is really interesting. With if we go back to that with the enterprise companies using AI and so on, they have a big technical depth. So it's a tricky situation because again, a lot of companies are struggling economically. So maybe they have a large system that they know that they need to rebuild, but they don't have they cannot take that cost right now. So it's always that balance. But then, do you take that short-term loss, or do you go on with what you have and for a few more years? I mean, just when I said it, few more years could be devastating to do that.
Yeah.
So it's a tough situation for the big companies as well too.
Yeah, I think it's always a way off of how much have you gotten back on your old system versus when do you need to innovate. And if you take a look at like an example like Nintendo, when they came out to the market and they built the 8-bit system, like technologically, by the time the 90s came around, they were already better consoles. Like Sega Mega Drive had come around, but what they saw on the market was that their system was still selling like crazy, like the 8-bit system, because people still love Super Mario. Basically,
yeah, good product,
a good product, right? So in their R&D sector, they already had the Super Nintendo, but they're like, why launch it yet when we're still making money off of this thing? So it's a constant way off there of like, how much do we need to be on the cutting edge versus the investment that we made on the previous system? Have we gotten that back? And all these aspects. So that's what I think every company needs to weigh off internally. But I think they should all be very excited about this as well, because I think the bigger the organization, the more processes, the more you can cut corners everywhere with AI. And I don't remember which company it was right now. It was a big tech company where they officially went out and said like, all right, it's not that we, don't want to work with human beings. We do. But before we hire any human being for any position right now, we need to first make sure that AI can't do it, right? It's a policy throughout the company. And then there has to be a deep research. What can AI do? What are its capabilities right now? And maybe evaluate 6 months from now, because maybe we can wait with it.
Yeah.
Now, what's happening right now in that AI sector is it's very tough to detect what is available. If you look in the big companies right now, like, and you look at what Facebook's doing with Llama, you look at what Amazon is doing with Anthropic, they're also companies that are on the stock market. So they need to create a hype around the products that they have, right? And, Zuckerberg will go out and say, so we have AI that's on the capability level of like mid-level developers. CEO of Anthropica will go out and say, we're on the level of mid right now, but in 12 months, we're going to be able to, have them act as senior developers, obviously with senior developers in the background controlling them, but the level of the code that they can output is like senior level. And somebody made a good point about it, but they're like, look, here in the UK, you're hiring a senior developer for $300,000 salary per year, right? So if you really believe in 12 months from now that you're going to have that, why do you have all of these positions open, right?
Yeah.
So it's a matter of like not just talking the talk, but also like walking the walk. And I think everybody knows that it's a combination of hype at the same time, but at the same time, there is clear like utility and value in it.
Definitely.
And I think even like your average person, because I'm myself not a person that buys into hypes a lot generally, right? So I was never that amazed by blockchain and by a lot of these different philosophies. I understand their application area and the value they bring, but I don't think it's even comparable to what we're seeing with AI right now. This is a complete like paradigm shift. And I think we're already seeing it. And I think 5-10 years from now, the world will look entirely different than it looks today.
Yeah. And at the same time, like you said, it's some people are catching on to that hype. You asked me before, like, what are clients looking for? And I mean, I have some meetings that they say this, I just want to get started with AI, but then they haven't even taken the step of digitalization to get everything, their processes online, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of companies needs to take that step in able to do to be able to use AI and so on, because.
But that's interesting, and I'll interrupt you at that one.
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe some of those might even have an advantage now, because we talked about earlier, some people have large systems.
They don't have to. They do a technology. They do a technology leap. So that's great that you mentioned. Actually, that's a huge opportunities for those companies to not have that technical depth and to just
jump on the latest thing,
leapfrog and just do an AI system immediately, right? So it's it's interesting times that we live in, definitely. So it's.
What's your experience? So for the people that don't know, we've been working on a few different products on their side. I mentioned that early on at the very intro of this video. So we have our Linkbound product. We also have our product like Avid Note. And Avid Note is one of those products. We built it with the friends of our, I think Nicola went to high school with Abdrisak. I've known him since I was 7 years old. And Abdrisak got his PhD from the same university where we studied. And what he figured out was that while doing his PhD, there was no good note-taking tool specifically for researchers, people that were doing their PhDs and researching. And then we went into this startup to create that tool for him called Avid Note. And for 3 years, we kept iterating on that product. And we got quite a lot of users. We got probably 10,000 users in the system. And we had a freemium model, so you could use it, but you could also pay for it. The problem was that nobody wanted to pay for it. Out of these 10,000 users, maybe we had 20, 30 paying customers. And after 3 years, I went to visit Abdrisak and I told him, like, Abdrisak, I don't think this is going to work. Like, we've been at it for 3 years. And what I really wanted was that I didn't want him to feel trapped in this application, in the sense that he felt like he had to continue because we had invested so much in it. And the story is going to go in the sense that this went for the better. But Abdrisak also told me that he did feel trapped. Like, he felt like everybody had invested so much. And he said, like, had I not had all of you guys around, I probably would have, given up on it. But the story goes that after that, Abdrisak said, give me 6 months to see if I can figure it out. And this was just when the AI boom had come out, ChatGPT was official, and we could get access to their API. And we integrated a lot of new features to make the tool like the AI tool for researchers. And what's happening right now is that we had a huge boom. So we went from having 20 paying customers to over 800 paying customers right now. and we kind of save the company. So that's one of the things that's happening right now. At the same time, what's happening is that, we're creating this tool for research with AI. What we're seeing now is that at a pace that's never been happening before, other companies are coming out with similar tools and we're competing. Again, it's so fast to build something, and when you see what they built, a lot of times you're like, man, didn't I think of that? Because we all haven't figured out what all of the capabilities and all the angles that we can take with AI are, which is maybe that's something with traditional SaaS. Most of the things were figured out before that. So what's your take on like competition right now with AI? How long you can hold a market right now, and just maybe the changing of the markets
Yeah.
with these new AI features?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's never been easier to create like copies of products. Like before, I think I could sit for an idea for like 3 years and no one would do it. Right
Yeah.
now, it's happening in 2 months. Like
Yeah.
it's coming 10 products similar to that immediately. Right, so you have to be fast, and I think people will still be changing fast. Also, that they don't have I would say the grit to stay in a product for enough long time. So I think just having the stamina to be in it for a longer period of time, that will also be a winning factor, to not jump on the next opportunity, because now it's so many opportunities. I would say to stay a bit disciplined in your passions, like, because I mean, I think we have said no to like five projects built the past 3-4 months that are really interesting, right?
Yeah.
But you have to start doing that because you cannot jump on everyone, right? So, but it is definitely a threat, and I think you also have to be faster in marketing. That you really start your marketing with, for example, with Linkbound, our product that we have built it, and we are building it publicly, right?
Yeah.
So it's also stressed that you have to weigh up the marketing towards how fast you're building. So definitely that's something that you need to, and I think that's a strategy also to build in public. I think some of them people will be more conservative again to share information about what we're building, to really be a little bit of a secret, but it's two philosophies, right? So it's
Absolutely. And I think there's extremes to that. I mean, I think on the very end, very famous for Steve Jobs was extremely secretive about what could get out of Apple before they had a keynote about it and so on. But at the same time, with social media, you're gonna have to pay for advertising in one way or another, right? And one way to build it is in public. And I think even for Avid Note, one of our biggest competitors, Gen AI, they're extremely public with all their information, constantly putting out on Twitter what's happening, what's working, what's not working.
Yeah.
And through those conversations, it's still marketing. People are becoming aware of your tool, and some people have told me, "Hey, check out Jenna because they know I'm working on Avid Note," not because they're in that space of research, but more because they're following him as a person building a startup, and now they're aware of what he's building in the background as well. So you're spreading the word and getting those network effects happening indirectly.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Like, go-to-market strategies are becoming more and more important. So if you're faster to building something and then spitting it out, that means that you have to be really good on the marketing side of things because there's more things getting out there. And I think a lot of classical IT dev companies are not so experienced in that. So it's a big advantage if you can have a really, really big focus on that.
No.
But at the same time, I'm also seeing as kind of like these next few years are very much like the early years of apps. So you would get a ton of different apps, and people would be very willing and open to testing new different apps. Like if you remember the early 2010s, everybody was constantly downloading an app. Hey, have you tried this app? And so it was fun. But then eventually it consolidates. So you have eventually, your 5 apps on your phone, your 10 apps.
Yeah.
Maybe if you have a specific thing that you're very interested, you have a few that other people don't have. But there's like maybe the 10, 15 apps that everybody uses across the board. Do you think that AI might go in that direction right now, that in these early stages, as far as like big product, it's going in the direction of we're putting out a bunch of small things that are going to be cool for the next 2 years and people are going to make money off of that. But then eventually it's going to consolidate into a few huge products, and it might even stay ChatGPT or whatever. Do you think it might go in that direction?
Yeah, I mean it's tricky because you always have ChatGPT and the LLMs as your competitor as well, right?
Yeah.
So you have to create enough value so they don't outcompete you, right? So yeah, it could go definitely in that direction. I mean it's tough to say. I would say that.
I think so as well.
But again, I think if you're focusing on the clients to create like enough value, and I would say it's a lot about packaging.
Yeah.
If you do that well enough, I think you will be in good hands. But if you take the comparison with mobile apps, the difference here is the mobile apps there was just fun, right? But here, all these apps, I think AI apps actually create values, right? That are real, but I think they can gain customers fast, but also lose them fast if they're not constantly developing, right? So I think the competition is definitely a lot harder, but I think it will also create better products because if you don't develop and create new features all the time, someone else will eat you up. If not, OpenAI will do it itself, I think.
You got it. And one question I want to ask you, and this is something that we're doing in our company, which is extremely, I would say, controversial, and that is the fact that we are an agency, but we're also building products. We're not the first one. There obviously been great products. There maybe like companies that have switched entirely from being an agency to becoming a product company, and even vice versa. That it's happened every now and then. But what's your take right now on if you want to go the route that we've gone, that you have an agency and you also want to build the products? What are your takeaways on what are the do's and what are the don'ts of that? Like, where can you go wrong? What are the things to do it if you really want to go in that direction?
I think again, and what I said earlier, to go back to the discipline of not starting too many at the same time. We did it early on. I think I lost count even how many we started at one point to have. I mean, if you're building a product and you have a consultant agency at the same time, I mean, just by having one, that will shift your focus from both your consultancy and the product, right? So if you're building a product, let's say then in the, like Avid Note in the research space, someone else is maybe doing that 100% with full focus. So just by doing that together with someone else, maybe that it's still a shift of focus. I mean, both you and me have had those days when we have like a marketing meeting for Zendev in the morning, then a development meeting, and then suddenly you switch focus to Avid Note, and that's a completely different, just the focus splitting. So you have to be a person that like to split focus first of all to be able to do it at all, I would say. But to minimize those split of focus to how many do you actually do at the same time, and then if you're doing it, you have to partner up with other people. I think early on the first ones we didn't do that. The really first ones, and obviously that didn't go well at all because it's impossible to drive a consultant agency and then do a product with the little finger at the side. So if you're doing it, I mean, we have a value, we can create the software. So we're good at that, right? So if you partner up with someone like we did then for Avid Note, a researcher that knows that space, then you can make it happen. But so definitely just discipline how many you do at the same time. And then also talk about, I would say, timelines. I think it's a mature thing to do. That it's easy to just jump on a project, start working, and everyone is optimistic this will go amazing, right? But 9 out of 10 times it doesn't, right? So I think it's mature to talk about expectations before you even start. It's not fun to do it. I think we are in the process of doing it right now, but it's just not comfortable discussions to have. But set a timeline then, I think, for a year and work. Okay, let's just focus on this in a year. You go in with 50% of your time. I go in with 50% of mine. Then let's talk about it because a lot changes in a year. Like we talked about, it can be personal. You can get like kids or someone gets sick in your family. Things changes, right? So those things are expectations to have that meeting and talk about it, and it's okay also to that things change, right? But when you're that passionate about a startup, people can also get mad because you are really passionate and you were going all into this together, and then someone gets a baby. Everything changes, right? So it's a mature thing to do. I'm not sure if you have anything to fill in on those things.
I think the reason most agencies eventually think about creating their own products is because they have a bench. Like every agency has a bench. So independent of if you're an agency of 10 people, you might have 2 people on the bench. If you're 200 people, you might have 20 people on the bench and so on.
Yeah.
And then it oftentimes feels like a waste of resources that people are not doing anything. And then you have maybe a cool idea and you're like, yeah, let's take these people off the bench and build it. And I think we started off on that end, and that will never work to have it like that. That I would say that's the first thing. And the reason is, first of all, it's very half-hearted. So it's not like you didn't go in with a mission. This is what we want to do. I need to build a team, and this is how we're going to do it. So I think you first need to be like disciplined in creating the core team,
Yeah.
which is not just the people that happen to be on the bench at that moment, right? No, you need to build the right team, and they're going to work on the side while the agency is doing what they're doing. These people have to stay on the project.
Yeah.
Now, the bench where they come in place is that if this specific team has some things that they need completed, they know that. And then they're making orders from that bench. Hey, we're going to need a little bit more front end development right now, a little bit more back end development. So it actually accelerates them. But they don't eventually lose this position of focusing on this project. And I think that the first thing we did was like, when somebody comes on the bench, work on the project, we find a project for them on the consulting side, fill in with another person, and we just kind of went in circles. So that didn't work out at all. So my experience there is like, you have to do it wholeheartedly. You can't partner with external. I mean, we've done that multiple times, more times than not. But if you don't want to partner with someone externally, if you just want to do it internally, the only way that I can see that work is if you have multiple co-founders, you say for one of the co-founders, well, this has to probably be your focus right now. You run in that direction, and you have your team that you work with. And maybe probably eventually, if that's successful, you might even have to split that up so it becomes two separate companies. And the thing that you're building then has to be within the domain of what that co-founder understands. It can't be something that they don't have an idea.
Yeah, with Linkbound, you did
with Linkbound, we did that. A great example here from the Balkans is, I think, Infinium and Productive, two co-founders, one went in one direction, but also 100% understood the product that they're building because they're building something for agencies, something that they came out of and so on. I think it's very similar with Linkbound in that sense. That's how we used to do a lot of sales, so we're going in that direction.
No.
So yeah, those are some of my takeaways. And however you look at it, I just happen to think that it's very fun to build like products. And if you get the luck that you build something really good, I think it's just amazing. And it's not that I don't think consulting is fun. I think that's fun as well, because it's a matter of, you're doing, quite honestly, something that a lot of different companies are doing.
Yeah.
And you have to be smart and effective, like in the small details that are small angles that you do. Like maybe you create some sort of internal script that makes you like 3% faster, because with agencies, it's all about those small margins and how can you optimize your organization so that you can have a little bit of an advantage as well. So I don't know how you look at, working with one versus the other.
What do you mean?
Working with the agency, and how your perspective on working with an agency versus working with the product.
I think we were building products, you and me, before we started an agency, right? And I think we both come from that perspective. And I think we have an advantage also compared to other consultant companies, because a lot of people have never built a product themselves, and they don't feel the responsibility of creating value, right? I felt that really early on. That's also, we had to coach our own people in that. I think a lot of consultant companies, just their metric is billing hours, right? And some companies take that too far, especially the big ones, right? They're not focused at all. Like, how does it feel if you just send a guy for 3 months and they're not contributing anything, right? You can't do that. You have to take responsibility for the product. And I think both you and me had that as a start. And I think our clients early on liked it, but that also goes down to the people in our organization, that we build our own products and everyone is focusing on creating value, right?
Right.
So I think that's a big...
It's a great input. I would just attach to that also. Like, people are just different. That's what I've learned throughout the years. Like, we would want perhaps for everybody to think the way that you and I do, which is what you would call in development terms like missionary developers. They're on a mission to do this together, so they care about the output and so on. What I've also seen throughout the years is that not all developers are like that. And some are like really good, but you would call them like mercenary developers, which really means is like, they're not too passionate about any specific project. They're more about the technology, and you're going to give them a task and they'll do a solid job on that specific task. I think when you choose the people out of the agency to work on the product, you have to choose the missionary people, because sometimes you, as the person like driving it forward, you're going to be out on ideas, out on energy. Then those people pull it. Like, they'll be there, well, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that. And that's what I'm experiencing, for example, right now with Linkbound. when I run out of ideas, the team is so heavily involved. They want to find solutions, that we find solutions together. It's not like one person just running the show.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's my experience.
But maybe then the mercenary developers could be more, or it is more of a fit for enterprise companies. That then there's more about
structure and tasks. Yes.
And they do it really great engineering around it, but it doesn't require that passion because there's already a built out process that just needs to be rebuilt in a best engineering way. So I think that's a good conclusion about it.
Yeah, I think so as well. That's been my take, and they can stay passionate about what they're passionate about, which is the technology part of it.
Yeah.
All right, Nicola, I think we've been, I don't know exactly, but probably for an hour we've been at it right now. So it was fun to chat again. And I think the last time we did this was maybe like 2 years ago that we sat down and talked about this. Let's not wait 2 years again. We're going to do this more frequently as things are changing. And I think we'll have more specific topics. But this time there was a lot to cover with the entire industry, AI coming in and everything. But it was a fun chat.
Likewise. Thank you for getting me here.
You got it. You got it. See you guys. Have a good one.
See you.